welcome back. So we'll still have debates on restructuring, true federalism, the constitution, marginalization, the indivisibility of Nigeria, amongst other issues. So how has Nigeria fared politically 58 years on? Joining us on this first segment in the studios here, we have Mr. Fasi Yusuf, who is the former Commissioner for Information in Ogun State. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Sitting next to him is Professor Akin Oyebode, who is a regular columnist here, and of course, Prof is the Professor of International Law and Diplomacy. Prof, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And sitting next to him is the National Chairman, African Democratic Congress, Mr. Ralph Nwosu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have a presidential aspirant of the NIP, Eunice Atuejide. Thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you.
So, Prof, let me start with you. Taking a look at where we're coming from, 58 years on, the debate on restructuring, on how we can restructure ourselves as a country. What form do you think it should take? I mean, flashing your mind back from 1960.
Well, in 1960, I was just 12 years old. And we had dreams. We had dreams. I was in Form 1 of the El Dorado that we're going to witness upon independence. Now, 58 years later, we've been poorly served by the succession of leaders that we've had. Now, you focused on restructuring. I recall that at the confab, that matter was discussed ad nauseam. People had different attitudes to restructuring. But since I came from the southwest region, we had a position paper. In fact, the Yorubas had 500 and something pages in terms of what they wanted from the confab. And we went into alliance with the South-South and the minorities from the north, especially Borno and Niger and all sorts of places. So there was some level of agreement that things cannot continue the way they were. And we had proposals submitted to the government of the day, nearly 600 proposals. And one thought that the government of the day will have set in motion the process of actualizing the recommendations of the National Conference. That was not to be. And I was mortified when, at the beginning of the year, we had the president of the country, President Buhari, saying that restructuring was not part of his priorities. And we thought it would be a disservice to Nigeria if all the effort that went into hammering out a way for Nigeria to proceed went to nothing.
But, Prof, what I'm going to ask is, what form that way should take? Because you have so many different sorts of models of restructuring. Let me just look at one of them. Some have said that we should restructure Nigeria into smaller independent federations and then devolution of powers to these small federation units. So I think one of the issues that we've had along the line is, what form will it take?
Well, if my recollection serves me right, there were two suggestions, one by the late Dr. Alex Ekweme, to reconstitute the Nigerian Federation into 8 geographical zones, and the other by General Abacha, who wanted 6 geopolitical zones in terms of reconstituting the Nigerian Federation. So the jury is still out on whether we should be 6 geographical zones or 8. In terms of how to devolve powers, what you call devolution, we want the federal government to shed weight. It's bloated, and little things like birth registry should be determined in Abuja. We thought that was very funny. Nigeria might be the only federal setup like that in the world, where everybody has to hurry to the center in order to do things that the state or the constituent unit should do. So there was a consensus that we need to strip the federal government of its overbearing and overarching powers. You remember also that I believe it's Dr. Ekerimadu, who said Nigeria should be sick and tired of what he characterized as a feeding bottle federalism, that the various states have to go to scurry to Abuja with their begging bowls every month to get hands out from the federal government. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a proper statement. If we have a true federalism, some people don't want to hear that phrase, true federalism, we should not chafe under the ogre of a federal government that was suffused with powers, so much so that the concerned units will be emasculated. So again, we've not fine-tuned where we should go, but definitely what we have is nothing but a federal setup.
Now, Mr. Yusuf, another aspect of the restructuring which has been attempted is constitutional amendment. We've been trying to amend the Constitution ever since it was promulgated. Most of it has come to nothing. You know? There was one that got thrown out because of one particular clause. Every other thing was thrown out. The most recent one didn't quite get past the last hurdle. Again, because of some offensive clauses to some of the stakeholders. Why should we be attempting to amend the Constitution when there are people who say that it's not amendable? We should throw it out and actually do another one.
In fact, Prof is even on record as referring to it as something panel-beated, which needs to, yeah.
You see, the way the, excuse me, the Constitution is structured has made it virtually impossible for any attempt to be made. And even if an attempt is made, it's pretty difficult for it to really be nurtured. You see, when you look at the structure of the country, it is so difficult looking at the interests of every constituent part. And for example, I'm talking about state structure. For you to amend, you have to go through the various 36 states. You need at least 2/3 of the states. And again, if any body or any group is attempting that, they need to carry other people or other tribes along.
Who may say no?
Who may, definitely, because of their inherent interest. And if you look at the structure, I mean, you look at revenue allocation and what have you. Because it is convenient for other parts of the country to feed on the other parts of the country, they would not want it to be possible. Whereas if you operate a federal structure where perhaps every federating unit is able to determine its own needs, are able to strive to achieve something, then whatever we have, depending on the arrangement, you give something to the federal, there'll be less dependence on Abuja. And there'll be less dependence on the federal might. And therefore, the present justness for power will be reduced. But as it is now, unless we do something about this fraudulent constitution, the country will not get anywhere. As it is, I mean, there was a time it was attempted that the various, I mean, local governments to have autonomy. That was killed. Because the governors are benefiting from it. We talk about state police, it's not possible. I mean, this is the only country where things are done the way we're doing. We talk about Britain, where we started from, parliamentary system, now we went to America, and again, we haven't gone beyond, we've gone overboard, to the extent that America themselves operating a federal system of government, they are laughing at us. That where did you get our own federal system from? It is peculiar to Nigeria. It is peculiar. And that is why we've not been able to make any progress in this country. And progress, development will continue to elude us. We will continue this way.